Welcome to Proven and Probable, where we focus on metals, mining, and more. I'm your host, Maurice Jackson. Our featured issuer is a gold junior mining company that is in the middle of its IPO listing on the TSXV. I'm speaking of Rover Metals. Joining us for a conversation is Judson Coulter, the CEO of Rover Metals. Before we begin, allow me to convey to our listeners that we are proud shareholders of Rover Metals for the virtues we will convey in today's message. Mr. Coulter, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Coulter, for first-time listeners, who is Rover Metals?
Rover Metals is a Canadian natural resource exploration company that is specialized in Canadian precious metal resources and more specifically focused on the Northwest Territories in and around the Yellowknife area, which is the historic gold mining district in the Northwest Territories.
Now, Rover Metals currently is a private company, and when we last spoke in July, Rover Metals had targeted an IPO listing in the fourth quarter of 2017. Please give us an update on the listing.
We are 40 days away from being called to trade. That's my best estimate at this point. We've done our initial filing documents with the exchange, and we've raised the minimum financing requirement to be approved to be called to trade on the Toronto Venture Exchange.
Now, before we get into the projects, Rover Metals completed an M&A. Please share the details and how will shareholders benefit?
We looked at various alternatives to listing of our shares on the Toronto Venture Exchange. And ultimately, we were partnered with a group from one of our third largest investors, which is Palisade Global Investments. And they introduced us to a group that had been very successful in seeding GT Gold as well as Integra Gold. And they'd had a shell that they were looking to do a transaction with. It's a capital pool company on the NEX board of the Toronto Venture Exchange. We met the group. They loved what we were doing. They loved the stage that Rover was at. And even though there's a little bit of dilution with the 4 million shares that is in that capital pool company, we felt that we were getting long-term strategic investors that would support us not just on the current financing, but in future financings, and definitely investors that take a longer-term approach to investing, having again seeded in the early stages GT Gold at the 15-cent round. So we were very happy with those discussions, and we also were able to get a firm commitment for a minimum investment of $600,000 if we were to do a reverse takeover of their shell. So that was something that we entered into discussions with in November, and really we finalized the definitive agreement last week, and so now we're just proceeding to listing.
Now, since our last interview, Rover Metals has completed a financing. Share with us how this capital has been used.
In the last interview, we closed our first tranche of a $1 million financing. And that first tranche was really just allocated to pre-planning of the exploration program. Since the interview, we closed a second tranche, which was through August 22nd. And we had roughly $800,000 was closed under that second tranche. The majority of that was put towards a $350,000 exploration program at UPTOWN Gold. We also entered into a strategic investor relations agreement with Palisade Global Investments. And the final tranche, which closed at the end of September, was for an additional $200,000 to bring the financing up to about $1 million total. And that money was for some G&A and also for acquisitions, which is what we used to acquire the Cabin Lake project. We're very excited about that, and we feel that at a minimum it's doubled the valuation of our company.
Well, speaking of the Cabin Lake Gold Project, please provide us with a brief narrative.
Yeah, the Cabin Lake project was incubated by Mining Hall of Famer Grant Thomas and his Aber Resources days prior to the discovery of diamonds. So in the late 1980s, Aber was doing a lot of gold exploration drilling in sort of the 100-kilometer radius area to the west of Yellowknife, so west of the historic Giant Mine and Con mines there, and en route and on trend out towards Fortune Minerals' Nico project. Yeah, so we, through one of our directors, Lou Cabela, Lou had personally worked the Cabin Lake project in the late 80s and early 90s for Gren, and he remembered it being a project of merit. So we looked at it, and we liked what we saw. It came with a historic resource of 50,000 ounces, and that's a non-43-101 compliant, because this was under the standards at the time in the late 80s. And then we also knew that there were some additional claims, the Camp Lake and the Sleeman Lake, that were within 10 kilometers of Cabin, that had an additional 35,000 ounces of gold. So collectively now, with acquiring all three properties, we've added 85,000 ounces of gold, as a resource. And again, this was fairly limited exploration, so we intend to drill these three projects out, the Cabin Lake area group of claims, and really are looking forward to hopefully defining an inferred resource in this year for the company.
Now, Rover Metals has identified a number of zones within the Cabin Lake Gold Project. What kind of grades have these zones produced?
Yeah, the Cabin Lake zone was, we had 152,000 tons grading 8.3 grams per ton. We had Camp Lake was 46,500 tons grading 13.7 grams per ton, and the Sleeman Lake area 54,500 tons grading 14 grams per ton. So high grade. The holes were fairly shallow at Cabin. There were only 100-meter holes, and they were right next to each other. And there's an entire shelf of step out here that we know is going to be mineralized, and so we're really looking forward to twinning those holes and extending the program.
Now, Judson, please tell us about the UPTOWN Gold Project.
Yeah, that's our project that we started the company on in the summer of 2016. It's directly adjacent to the historic Giant Mine. It's literally in the shadow of the Giant Mine head frame. So we're just on the west side, and then on our northern border is TerraX Minerals, and they're I think today they closed at a 60 million market cap company. So certainly in a great gold district and a proven area, right in the city limits of Yellowknife. We're right at the airport, hydro lines right on the property, and existing roads through where our drill targets, our existing drill locations are. So great access, and right now we're just in the middle of planning a $80,000 IP resistivity study. There's two frozen lakes about 6 meters in depth that extend to the north of the rod zone. That's Baker Lake, and then there's another lake that extends to the north of the Fox South zone. And we, while these lakes are frozen over the winter time, we suspect through the mapping program that we did in Q4 of last year, in addition to pairing that mapping program with the drill results, that the shear zones and the strike zones that we've drilled extend right beneath these lakes. So with the resistivity work that we're planning for early mid-February, you will be looking to show the market that these existing areas extend, and then we're likely to do some drilling on the lake, into those extended shear zones before we get the spring thaw.
How many zones does the UPTOWN Gold Project have, and what kind of grades have you found there?
Yeah, for sure. Let's get into that. So we've got right now we've got 6 zones identified. And within that there's A lot. We've really just were able to in the past summer focus on 2 of those 6 zones. Let's get into the grades. The rod zone, we had 2.5 meters at 26 grams per ton, 2 meters at 8 grams per ton, half a meter at 35 grams per ton, another half a meter at 33 grams per ton, and then 1 meter at 22 grams per ton. So, we're sort of, if we're able to extend the rod zone north into Baker Lake with the resistivity study, we've got a case for open pit mine potential. For the Fox South zone, we've got, which is, to the southeast of Rod, right next to Giant. That's right where the highway is, so you can just walk in. I think it's a 5-minute walk in from the highway. What we have there is we've got 1 meter at 2.5 grams per ton, half a meter at 5.5 grams per ton, and 2 meters at 5 grams per ton, and 4 meters at 3 grams per ton. So, again, we're looking to, that Fox South zone is, roughly a kilometer in length and strike, and so we're trying to really show the extension into the UTG lake, which is north of Fox South. It's a separate lake than what's north of Broad, and really show the extension of that shear system. We've also discovered in our drill program this summer that within each of both the Rod and the Fox South zone, we intersected new zones. So we have what we're referring to as a Rod West zone, as well as a Fox Southwest zone, which is a newly discovered shear system within each of those 2 zones.
Well, I have to tell you, both of the grades on both projects, I should say, are quite impressive. How viable are the grades on these projects?
Well, I think the economics for Cabin Lake. I've talked very briefly with Robin Goad, the CEO of Fortune, and sort of talked about the history and the endowment of the area. He was familiar with the work that was done by Aber Resources, and he was familiar with some of the mineralogy and the geology, the Iron Band Formation for a gold deposit. And he seemed to think that there was possibility for us, if we wanted, to do a deal whereby that the Nico facility could process the ore coming out of Cabin Lake, and it's very much economical. I mean, what we're hoping to prove up there is a multi-million ounce gold deposit.
Now, based on what we know, how much is a ton of rock worth in the Uptown Gold Project and the Cabin Lake Gold Project?
Well, that's a tough question. I think let's just value this at $20 per ounce in the ground. How about that? But we don't have a resource today to really talk about that. But we've got what we believe is a minimum of 1 million ounces there in the Cabin Lake area, but we're not quite there yet, ready to disclose a formal valuation in the ground, right?
Switching gears, let's visit some numbers. Tell us about the stock. How many shares do you have issued and outstanding?
There's 31 million shares outstanding. We've got 9.1 million warrants, so fully diluted equity, roughly 40 million. We're under our current financing is priced at 12.5 cents per, that's Canadian, 12.5 cents Canadian per unit. And that gives us a pre-money market cap of $5 million Canadian. And just again, referencing back to earlier in the conversation, Maurice, looking at public company comparables for the Northwest Territories. The Northwest Territories, because it is one of the most mining-friendly jurisdictions in Canada, has some of the best market caps for Canadian juniors. So the smallest comparable in the Northwest Territories that we can really draw upon would be Terra X at $60 million.
It's quite impressive.
So, hopefully, we'll know I think in 30 or 40 days here, we're looking to move our market cap well north of 10 million is the goal.
We might have to change the name from Uptown to Upside. Let me ask you this, if I may. How many options does management have?
Well, management has zero options, and right as it stands, we're in the process of adopting a stock option plan mid next week. And so after this interview, I'm talking to our HR, and we'll be formalizing our director and officer stock option plan. That will be 10% of the fully diluted equity post current financing. So I expect that to be somewhere in the range of 5 to 6 million options. Those options will be allocated to the directors and officers of the company, excluding myself. Being a founder of the company, I'm going to be rewarding our board and our management team with the options.
All right. Let me ask you this as well. You've touched on it before, but just let's clarify. How many warrants do we have, and when do they expire?
There's 9 million warrants. They expire in 2 years.
All right. How about change of control fees? Are there any?
Well, right now, change of control, no, I mean, there's no change of control fees at this point. That being said, the founders, management, and the board, and very close friends that were seated in the first 2 rounds trusted. We control about 22 million shares of the company, so certainly I don't think there'll be a change of control that's not at least a friendly takeover.
All right. Is management charging any consultant fees?
Ron and I, starting with November of last year, we both started drawing a salary of $5,000 Canadian a month. Upon consummation of the go public transaction, both Ron and I are likely to receive a compensation increase, and that will be formalized by our board, by a compensation committee, which I'm not part of, as well as an independent HR advisory firm.
Now, what assurances do we have that management won't dump the shares once you reach IPO?
We're locked up by the Toronto Venture Exchange value escrow plan, which is a 3-year program. Slowly releases shares over 3 years, but I'm certainly personally going to be buying up as much stock as I can, as I'm a huge believer, and this is a company that I've built since 2016. We restarted it. I mean, the company itself actually predates 2016 back to 2014. So myself, certainly, I'm not really one to. I'm very much long-term focused, as our investor base, which was primarily built from friends and family up until the August closing of last year.
What will the float be once you are IPO?
I would suspect that roughly 50% of the company's shares will be in the float. That's going to be, roughly 20 to 25 million shares.
Okay. What is your burn rate?
Right now, our burn rate, excluding anything to do with expiration and new property acquisition, that'd be about $15,000 a month. Again, that will change upon consummation of this going public transaction, as there's $1 million that's already been raised, and there will be some directors that have previously been excluded on monthly fees. Really just one of our more senior directors that will also be likely getting compensated with a monthly director fee, because he is our president as well, and that gentleman is Keith Minty.
All right. And how about your G&A?
Well, that's kind of covered in our burn, right? That's the $15,000 a month at the moment. So that what we do have that will get starting to get amortized into G&A once we're a public company is we have roughly an $8,000 a month investor relations contract over the next 3 years with Palisade Global Investments. So I guess just to round off, we could say that our burn's going to go to about 25,000 if we include the IR work as a public company.
Okay. And how about office and legal?
Outside of the legal work on the IPO transaction, which is what I'm really is a one-time expense. I expect that to come in somewhere between 65 to 80,000. It's an amalgamation transaction, which results in any placements under the current financing being free trading, which is why we sought out good legal to really make our, again, increase the marketability and have that offered to our investors. Aside from this one-time legal expense, I expect our legal to be virtually zero until our next private placement, which is likely to be in Q4 of this year. And what was your other question besides legal?
Just office expenses.
Office expenses, at the moment, we do have free office space, and that's just being provided, really through some other companies from some related shareholders that have given us some free office space. So we've got pretty low G&A.
That's pretty good use of leverage, I must say.
Yep.
Judson, let's discuss an opportunity for our listeners. Rover Metals will be conducting a financing. Give us the details.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're raising up to $5 million. That's talking about the pre-money market cap earlier. $5 million pre-money market cap. We'll do up to $5 million at 12.5 cents. And for Canadian investors, that financing has been made TFSA and RRSP eligible, which is just some tax-free benefits, as well as flow-through tax credit eligible. So right now we've raised $1 million. I've got commitments for another $500,000. So by the end of or middle of February, I expect the financing to be at $1.5 million. And we will keep the financing open right through to PDAC in Toronto, which is the first week of March. We've been focusing on $3 million of the $5 million being flow-through funds out of Toronto, and most of those funds that we've talked to are closing their fund the end of February, and they'll be looking to disperse the beginning of March. So essentially, that's where we'll be looking really to close off the $5 million. Is with a $3 million syndicate of flow-through funds out of Toronto.
And switching gears, Judson, what keeps you up at night that we don't know about?
Well, okay. I sleep pretty well. It's just I know I have to be up at 6 in the morning to call Toronto, so I guess I decide to sleep at night rather than not be tired the next day, Maurice.
All right, fair enough. Last question. What did I forget to ask?
Well, I think just near term, we are presenting and we have a booth at the Cambridge Vancouver Resource Investor Conference here in Vancouver. That conference starts this Sunday and is at the Vancouver West Convention Center. We're at booth 1041. The entire team will be on the floor, and it's a really good opportunity for existing investors and just people that have been following us, through your newsletter and your video interviews, and just really through our distribution network, to come by, meet everybody, get more technical information. Our VP Exploration and our entire technical team will be there. So we're looking forward to shaking a lot of hands and telling people the story.
And if you're a subscriber of Proven and Probable, we highly encourage you to stop by and visit Judson and the entire team of Rover Metals. Judson, if investors want to get more information about Rover Metals, please share the contact details.
rovermetals.com. That's everything you need to get our contact information. Just go to the contact page and it's all right there.
And last but not least, please visit our website, www.provenandprobable.com, where we interview the most respected names in the natural resource space. You may reach us at contact@provenandprobable.com. Judson Coulter of Rover Metals, thank you for joining us today on Proven and Probable.
Thank you for joining us today on Proven and Probable. Remember to like and subscribe for more conversations with the most respected names in the natural resource space. Check out our website at www.provenandprobable.com. The information presented on Proven and Probable is provided for educational and informational purposes only, without any express or implied warranty of any kind, including warranties of accuracy, completeness, or fitness for any particular purpose. The information is not intended to be and does not constitute financial, investment, or trading advice, or any other advice. You should not make any financial, investment, or trading decision based on any of the information presented without first undertaking independent due diligence and consultation with a professional broker or competent financial advisor.